Get started.
Okay. Pursuant to recently adopted amendments to the Illinois Open Meetings Act included in Public Act 1010640, public bodies may, in certain circumstances, hold entirely virtual public meetings without a quorum physically present in any one location. Governor Pritzker's current executive order has extended this provision through May 28th. As chair of the Finance Committee, I have made the determination that it is not practical nor prudent to meet in person today. Village Manager Phil Corrali is in the Village Hall conference room in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. Phil, could you call roll call, please?
Certainly. Trustee Vree.
Here.
Trustee Hallwax. Trustee Rubin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
The Finance Committee meeting is being conducted as a virtual meeting via Zoom webinar software and is being recorded and simulcast. A quorum of members is present via remote access. As required by law, I will ask for a roll call rather than voice votes on any agenda item requiring a vote. In accordance with the supplemental rule the board approved on April 16th, 2020, the email address and phone number designated for public comment for this meeting were published with the meeting agenda. This time I would ask that Phil Corrali read the public comments received on non-agenda items that were submitted prior to the meeting. Public comments on agenda items, if any, will be read when we reach that item on the agenda. If a member would like to submit a public comment during the meeting, please email your comment to glencoemeeting@villageofglencoe.org. Written comments should be limited to 400 words.
Trustee Vree, there were no public comments received.
Okay. All right, getting into our agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the April 19th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Trustee Vree.
Yes.
Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Those are approved.
All right. Nikki, can we have a review of the monthly finance reports?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening. Before we get started today, I just would like to introduce the newest member of our team. Margaret Schwartz is with us tonight. She's our new Assistant Finance Director. Margaret comes to us from the Village of Glenview. She was their Resolution Center Supervisor, and she worked for them for 13 years. And brings with her a wide breadth of knowledge in purchasing, payroll, customer service, and budgeting. So we are very lucky to have her, very happy to have her join our team. So please join me in welcoming her.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, on tonight's agenda, we'll be covering the April Treasurer's Report, go over the major fund highlights, cash flow projections, and the golf club. And then just a few updates on the CIP monthly report. Okay, happy to report all good news in the general fund again. So we continue to perform very well. We are, if you can believe it, already 33% through this fiscal year. It's just flying by. Our major revenues continue to outperform both budgetary targets and where we were at this time last year. Property taxes are higher than budget, or higher than prior year and budget. They're at 52.4% of budget. Just a couple notes. We haven't heard anything new in terms of the timing of the issuance of the second installment bills yet, but we did get what the county calls their levy edit report, which is basically the report that all of the taxing districts certify. And we certify that the numbers that they have are correct, and those numbers are used to calculate the actual bills. So I would say, I can't make any promises, but we do remain optimistic because this is actually timely, right around the time of year where they do typically send this report for our review, and we did get it yesterday. The other thing that was included on that report, and we had kind of talked about this a little bit in the fall, is that the county or the state of Illinois has passed Public Act 1020519, which provides for taxing bodies to recoup a portion of their property tax levies that were previously refunded. So the county goes through and determines various refunds that have happened in the Village of Glencoe last year, and then they add that to our levy this year. So that happens automatically. It happens statewide. And what they're estimating that we might get this year is an additional $224,000. So that would be money that, again, was deducted from us last year that we didn't receive and that we would anticipate getting this year. That doesn't.
So Pardon me. So that's effectively an add-on to what would otherwise be the cap?
Correct. So that would be in addition to above and beyond what we would have capped at for PTEL. So that's new this year. So we haven't seen it yet. So we'll wait and see when that will come to fruition. But that is certainly good news. It could be good news. Anything that we get above and beyond. That would not account for any refunds that happen this year. So we'll always kind of be in this catch-up cycle with property taxes. But at least they are creating a mechanism for us to be able to recoup that money. So that's good news. As far as income tax goes, income tax continues to perform strong. With April refunds, tax returns coming in, we are starting to see that revenue kind of kick up a little bit in the month of April. Sales taxes continue to perform strong and outperform our targets. Our places for eating tax is slightly less than that 33% of the year. But when you take a look at it, last year we had a 1 month lag because that tax did not go into effect until January and the first remittances weren't until February. So when you adjust it and compare apples to apples, we're running about $5,000 more this year in revenue than we were last year. So that's also a good news story as well. So overall, the general fund is doing very well. In the water fund, our revenues are continuing to be fairly stable. It's a little early in the year to make any long-term projections here on the water fund, but we would expect these revenues to kick up as the summer gets going and irrigation starts kicking up again. And we are still seeing strong performance in terms of the accuracy of the meter reads that are happening. And I believe we only have one household remaining that needs to be changed out to the new technology. So that's a remarkable changeover.
Can I ask one quick question? If you go back, it's insignificant, but how these numbers don't line up. So we're ahead in fixed charge and volumetric charge, but behind in total year over year. Am I?
So these two are only two of the revenues that are in the water fund. So we have other revenue in the water fund. One of the things would be the lease property payment, or the lease payments that we receive for the rental. How do I describe this? The rental equipment that's at the top of the water tower.
Okay.
So those come in.
That's lower.
That's probably a little bit lower. But the big difference here is that we had a one-time use of our water connection to Northfield last year. I believe someone left a valve open and they used a little bit more water than they had anticipated, so they had a very high bill last year. So when you compare last year to this year, overall revenue is lower because of that one-time ancillary thing, and that goes to a different revenue account. It's not measured through these two.
$20,000 worth of water was.
I think it was about 40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the bill was originally calculated out at 70, and we brought it down to 40, but it was a valve that was left open, and it was a
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I just did.
No, that's a great question because that is kind of an outlier, and we should have highlighted that. So that was a good observation. I don't think that's a mistake they'll make twice. Yeah. Okay, and then so as we are looking at cash projections as a whole, because our general fund is performing so well, right now we're projecting that we would receive revenue in excess of budget, $668,000 over the revenue budget. That doesn't account for the expenditures that we're drawing down because we are targeting, I think it was about 1.2 million to draw down in capital this year, maybe a little bit more than that. And then in the water fund, if we project out forward, we're projecting that we would receive revenue at $43,000 less than budget. But again, we have that one-time comparable that we're adjusting for, and it's still a little early in the year to account for that. So overall, I would say that in our major revenue, our major operating funds, we're performing as expected, and it's good news. We are also continuing to see sales taxes in record numbers, and our use taxes have not decreased at the same rate. So we are starting to see the use tax wane a little bit, but we're definitely seeing sales tax outperform targets. Are there any other questions on the financial report? Okay. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Stella for the golf club financial update.
Thanks, Nikki. Briefly discussing April because it was not much to discuss. It was a terrible month for golf. It was the lowest round count that we've had, with the exception of 2020 when we were completely closed. So we did bounce back that year, and I have high hopes that we'll also bounce back from the slow start that we had this spring. Sustainability, I just wanted to point out that we are always looking to do what we can for the environment and for sustainability. The old intake pipe that we removed and replaced in the pond has now been used on 5 drainage projects. We didn't just toss it out. So reducing and reusing are the most effective ways to save on natural resources and protect the environment and save money. And I just wanted to point out that we are doing that on a daily basis. Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club does have an event tomorrow evening. You've all been invited. Keep it in mind if you have nothing to do between 6 and 8 tomorrow. Please stop by. We have about 35 residents attending to learn more about the project and hopefully gain some interest in possible donors. And that is the report for April. Any questions?
Thank you, Stella.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on in the agenda, going to packet pages 51 through 53. We have the calendar year 2022 April update on the CIP program, and then also the quarterly update on the timing of these projects. The only update that we have for the month of April are all timing changes. There are updates to the schedule for 22 projects, including the council chambers upgrade, safe routes to school, sidewalk pavers, water main replacements, the water plant pumps, traffic controller modifications, and the downtown streetscape. The changes in all of these projects, the timelines have been pushed out, with the exception of the downtown sidewalk paver restoration. That project completion date has been moved up, so we do expect that to be completed a little bit sooner than we had anticipated. So those are the only changes for this month. And at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions on the CIP update.
I think it was last month that Jonathan asked to what extent items either under community investment program or other capital items could be that we had intended to just use general funds for could be funded with bond funds because of the potential delay in our property tax receipts at the end. I was just wondering if you'd been able to look at that yet.
So we haven't identified specific projects, but I can tell you that the categorical areas that we had identified with the bond proceeds were street improvements, stormwater improvements, sidewalk and bike paths, and I believe sanitary sewer improvements. So anything related to those categories could also be funded with bond funding. So actually quite a few of our projects this year could be funded with that if we need to dip into those reserves, and then we can always pay it back, or we can reallocate funding as well if we need to do that.
Trustee Rubin, it is likely that 3/4 of the vehicles in the Public Works Department that we had anticipated we would be replacing this year, we will not be able to replace simply because of availability or lack thereof. And that's not an insignificant dollar figure. I think if we look at the general fund projects that are listed out there, safe routes to school is one that is likely one where we could potentially use bond funds and then reimburse the bond fund with the state grant monies that are going to come back to us. That's about $130,000 project. We could certainly do the same with a downtown sidewalk paver restoration, and we can talk through that. I'll talk with Nikki and Dave about that as those bills start coming in now that project is about ready to wrap up. There isn't a ton of additional aside from sanitary sewer rehab in the general fund that I think we probably would reallocate out of that fund. I would say that the council chambers upgrade from a timing standpoint, it may be that we're not actually expending those resources in this calendar year, but we certainly are going to be moving forward with that project, hopefully this calendar year. So the delay of that expenditure may help as well. But we'll continue to monitor those and work through it. It's a fair point, and we'll highlight it next month a little bit more clearly.
Thank you.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay,
All right, is that it?
that is all we had
The
for
only thing
regularly scheduled.
I would note, I mentioned this last month, two things if I can real briefly. Thursday night on the agenda, we will do a brief presentation relative to the intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Northfield to share the village's infrastructure relative to their water metering project. That's going to provide some resources into the water fund. As you saw in that agenda item, there's an upfront payment to the village of about $50,000. So that may wipe away those projected deficits up against last year. So Northfield is supplementing our water revenues 2 years in a row. So that's one point. The second is next month we'll be talking, the Finance Committee meeting in June is likely to be a pretty hefty one. We'll be presenting the audit and the actuarial report for the pension funds. We're also going to be presenting to you some information relative to some mid-year adjustments to our class and compensation schedule for a few of our current classifications that appear to be falling behind a bit in terms of our comparables. So we'll be presenting that information along with a number of other things. So June's going to be a much longer Finance Committee meeting. Sorry about that. But we tried to at least make this one brief for you.
All right. All right, well, unless there's anything else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thanks. See you guys Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks,
Night.
everybody.
Night, everybody.
Bye-bye.